Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Want to continue the conversation on, frankly, what we have been talking about really the last 48 hours in this NCAA tournament, and that is what the heck is going on, the present and future of Kentucky basketball. Obviously, if you've been plugged in, you know we've kind of hit on this from every angle. We talked about on Thursday night, Kentucky's loss to Oakland, what it means in the moment, what could be next at Kentucky, and we even said, like, if somehow, some way, Kentucky moves on from John Calipari, who should they seriously look at as candidates? Well, that was until Saturday morning when we got the Matt Jones report that basically Mitch Barnhart is very much considering making a move and moving on from John Calipari. We talked about that in a standalone video a few hours ago. So we've hit on this thing from all angles. But there is one angle that we haven't hit on. We've talked about the future potential candidates. We've talked about the realistic ones, the Scott Drews, etc., and the unrealistic ones, probably the Billy Donovans, the Brad Stevens, the guys like that. But I only bring it up because there really is one candidate that I frankly have not talked about, and that is UConn head coach Dan Hurley. And I haven't really talked about him. I don't really think he's a realistic candidate, but it's my job to talk about what you guys and girls want to hear. And I will tell you, out of every single candidate, out of every single question that I have probably gotten related to the future of Kentucky basketball outside of will John Calipari be back, the number one question I've gotten, could Kentucky actually convince Dan Hurley to leave UConn and take the Kentucky basketball job? Is there any chance that he would be a candidate at all? And I actually got a DM on Saturday afternoon from a listener named Travis that I think perfectly kind of crystallized this exact question and why I wanted to do a standalone video. Here is a DM from Travis. By the way, Travis is a very famous listener of this show. If you listen to the full episodes at the end of the show, we shout out Torrent Craig. We shout out Rachel, who hates my voice. Well, Rachel's husband is Travis. Poor Rachel is probably subjected to a lot of Torres right now because obviously there is a lot going on with Kentucky basketball. But here's the question from Travis, a Kentucky fan. He said, I know it's a long shot, but since I've seen it floated out there, I want your opinion. What would you think about Kentucky going all in on Dan Hurley? Would it be a good fit? Would he even consider it? Would UConn make it impossible to leave? Great question, Travis. Crystallized in a very easy to consume way. And so I think from the Dan Hurley perspective as it pertains to UConn, there's really two ways to talk about it. And I think each are interesting and we're going to discuss both. The first one, is it even possible for Kentucky to get Dan Hurley? But then beyond that, is this a job that he would actually be interested in? Is there any way he could potentially leave UConn for Kentucky? Let's go ahead and dive in. The first part to me is actually the more interesting one because I'll be honest, I just think it's really hard to see the scenario where financially it makes sense, okay? So John Calipari, we all know, we're talking about Calipari now, we'll get back to Hurley in a second. We all know Calipari will be owed $33 million. If Kentucky ultimately fires him, we know how stubborn Coach Cal is. He is going to get every last dollar of that $33 million, okay? Now, the thing with his buyout, which will be interesting, as we discussed earlier in the day, how is the buyout for John Calipari set up? Is there a lump sum that is owed to him immediately upon firing? Is it all $33 million? Realistically, my guess is that is probably not the case, right? There is probably a big lump sum, maybe as much as 8 figures. Maybe it's 10 million, maybe it's 12, maybe it's 15 that would be owed upon firing him or within 30 days. And then my guess is the rest of that can be paid out over an extended period of time. We talked about Jimbo Fisher this morning. Jimbo Fisher, I believe the number was 15 million that he was owed day one. Now that's a lot of money, but compared to 75 million, which was the total buyout, all of a sudden 15 million doesn't seem that bad. 15 million, the rest is deferred. I forget what it was. I think it was like 2 million a year for the next, or maybe it was 4 or 5 million a year for the next 10 years, whatever. But one, you got to, before I know if Dan Hurley's a candidate, I have to know what you actually owe John Calipari. Because at the end of the day, what makes somebody like a Jay Wright appealing, besides the fact that he's an amazing coach, is you don't owe him, and you wouldn't have to pay a buyout to get him out of any existing contract. It's the same if the Chicago Bulls fire Billy Donovan. It's the same, if Brad Stevens doesn't have a buyout as an executive with the Boston Celtics. That's the part, because you got to pay Calipari. Do you also have to pay a buyout for the guy that you are trying to hire? Well, with Dan Hurley, I can guarantee you there is some sort of buyout. Now, there is no public number known. I am efforting it. I'm trying to speak to some people that would probably know. But my guess is that is a buyout that you are going to have to pay to get Dan Hurley out of his contract. So on top of paying Cal, you're going to have to pay UConn a lot of money just to even speak with Dan Hurley. My guess, he just signed a major contract last offseason, 6 years, about $33 million, made him the sixth highest paid coach in college basketball this year at $5.25 million. And I only bring it up because to get Dan Hurley even out of his contract, my guess is you're talking a minimum of $10 million. So think about it. Let's say you owe Cal $15 million, point blank, end of story by the end of this month if you want to fire him. Then let's say the rest of it, the rest of the 33, that'd be $18 million, can be extended out over a period of time. Well, now to hire Dan Hurley, you are going to have to pay something exorbitant to even get him out of his UConn contract. Again, I don't have an exact number, but my assumption would be that we are talking about a eight-figure figure to get him out of his UConn contract. All of a sudden, this money just starts piling up really quick. And so it's easy to say, oh, we have the money and money will get figured out. We're in the SEC and we're going to make this much in TV money. But just think about what we're talking about right now. $25-30 million just to get Dan Hurley to campus. That is before you pay him. And keep in mind a couple things. One, as far as his buyout, that would probably be all owed up front. So Calipari, if you fire him, you could probably extend it out over a period of time. If you're buying him out of his UConn contract, that's not something that can be extended out over a 10-year period. That's like we got to write a check today. But then remember, Dan Hurley is a guy that's making $5.5 million this year. So what is the number that is realistically going to get him interested in coming to Kentucky if he is? Cal's making 8 or 9. I would think that Dan Hurley to leave UConn would want to be the highest paid coach in college basketball. So we're talking now $9 million a year. We're talking about paying his staff. We're talking about paying out any multi-year contracts on the current staff under John Calipari. So if Orlando Antigua, if Chin Coleman, if they're under multi-year contracts, you can't just wait for them to be, wait for those contracts to expire. You're probably going to have to pay those out too. So I think realistically, you're probably talking about like $50 million that you have to have today. Forget what you owe Cal down the road. Forget that you're probably going to have to give Hurley a 7, 8, 10-year deal. We are talking about a lot of money that you would be owed. And again, that's what makes him different than, say, a Jay Wright. You can pay Jay Wright a ton of money because you don't also have to pay his employer to get him out of his existing contract. That's a huge part of this deal. Now, let's get to the second part of, does it make sense? Would Dan Hurley be interested? And I think there's a few things here. Travis did ask about the fit. I'll say this. I think Dan Hurley, I think Kentucky, I should say, is really like the one spot where I do think from a blue blood perspective outside of UConn, and I don't know what a blue blood is, so don't ask me about the UConn blue blood debate. But part of successful coaches, right fit at the right school. And the one thing I will say, I don't think Dan Hurley, I think UConn is the perfect fit for Dan Hurley, okay? He's Jersey, he's rough around the edges, he's loud, he makes faces, he doesn't smile, he yells at refs. Well, guess what? That's all of us Northeast a-holes. Like, I hate to say it, that's who I am. My wife gets mad at me all the time. She's like, why are you mad? I'm not mad. I just don't smile. I don't walk around the house smiling all day. I'm not freaking Buddy the Elf, okay? I can't get excited. Smiling isn't my favorite. I can't get excited about everything. And that's who Dan Hurley is, and he fits perfectly at UConn. UConn fans love it. Connecticut people have a chip on their shoulder. It's just who we are. It's what we're about. I'm from Connecticut. I grew up in Connecticut. Cold winters, wind, snow, darkness. That's where we thrive. That's where we do our best work. And that's why Dan Hurley is a perfect fit at UConn. I will say, I do think he'd be a great fit at Kentucky because I think Kentucky fans kind of thrive on the same thing. Chip on our shoulder. Nobody believes in us. We're being doubted. The NCAA is out to get us. Like all that stuff. I think there's something there with Kentucky. So I think he fits there. I don't know that he fits at any other like blue blood program, right? Certainly doesn't fit at at UCLA. Can't see him wearing sunglasses and shades on a Tuesday, okay? I don't think he fits at Carolina. They're a little wine and cheese crowd. We know about them. Don't think he fits at Duke for sure. Don't think he fits at Kansas even. So you talk about the realistic places that where he would actually make sense and he would fit and it would fit like a glove. I would say Kentucky's just about the only other one I can think of. Now, to me, what becomes an even more important and somewhat interesting question, and this is the one that I haven't gotten an answer to from Kentucky fans, what can Kentucky offer that UConn can't right now, this second? Now, I will say, if this was 5-6 years from now, if there was a clear divide between the SEC and the Big Ten and everybody else is playing for peanuts, that's a different conversation, but that's not where we are right now. Right now, UConn offers Dan Hurley everything that Kentucky can offer. UConn just won a national championship. Great facilities. He's one of the top 10 highest paid coaches in college basketball. My guess is he's going to get another new contract after this season to make him top 2, top 3. And again, that depends on if John Calipari's still getting paid by Kentucky. So I'm struggling to find, and this is something from Kentucky fans, I'm not trying to be sarcastic, but what does Kentucky offer that UConn doesn't? UConn offers a chance to compete for national championships. UConn offers what I always say, even let me put it this way. What I always say, there's about 8 to 10 jobs in the country that basically everything you need to win a national championship is there. You will get whatever you need, whether it's facilities, whether it's NIL money, whether it's resources, whether it's private jets, whether it's budget for recruiting, whatever you need, budget for assistant coaches. About 10, 12 jobs that really provide that. Kentucky's one, UNC's one, UConn's one, Arizona's one. I could go on and on, but you kind of get the point. And that's why I don't think UConn is, or I don't think Dan Hurley is a candidate. Now, somebody like Scott Drew, can Scott Drew really sit there and say that Baylor gives him every single thing he needs to win at the highest level? That I don't know. There's other guys, whoever, you know who the other candidates are in college basketball circles. Chris Beard, don't think you're necessarily getting him out of that contract, but does Ole Miss provide him everything you need to win a national championship? Of course not. Alabama, Nate Oates, probably not, but guess what? It doesn't matter. Nate Oates is signing contract after contract. He ain't going anywhere. So the point that I'm going to wrap with here is pretty straightforward. I just don't know what UConn offers him or what Kentucky would offer him that UConn doesn't have. Facilities, fan support, interest, passion. I mean, you can't tell me that Kentucky is any more passionate than UConn is. I mean, go back and watch the highlights of the Big East Championship game where it was 90% UConn fans screaming from the rafters. Tickets are through the roof. It's insane. So listen, I want to have a fair and honest conversation about this, and maybe I'm missing something. Going to try and figure out the exact buyout number for Dan Hurley, but to me, I don't see it. I don't see it. It's why I haven't talked about it. But many of you have asked. Travis asked a great question. Figured it was worth at least diving into. If you enjoyed this video, do me a quick favor. Make sure to subscribe to the Aaron Torworth Pod YouTube channel. New clips, new videos going up every single day. Appreciate your support. Be back soon.